She asked her millionaire best friend to have her first time with him, but what was born was love. Hey there, tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from before we start. And once the story ends, make sure to give it a score from 0 to 10. Enjoy the ride. She knew this conversation would change everything, but she asked anyway. Emma Sullivan stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of the small downtown coffee shop, her blue eyes searching for courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Her blonde waves caught the harsh fluorescent light, and she noticed her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the porcelain sink. 28 years old, successful, independent, and about to ask her best friend something that could destroy 12 years of perfect friendship. The coffee shop buzzed with typical Tuesday afternoon energy. Students hunched over laptops, business people rushing through their caffeine fix, the familiar hiss of the espresso machine creating a soundtrack to her racing thoughts. Emma had chosen this place specifically, neutral territory, public enough to prevent any awkward scene, yet quiet enough for the conversation that had been building in her mind for weeks. Blake Anderson sat at their usual corner table, his tall frame folded comfortably into the worn leather chair. His green eyes scanned his phone with the focused intensity that had made him millions in the digital entertainment world. Even in casual jeans and a simple gray sweater, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built an empire before 32. But to Emma, he was still the same Blake who had shared his lunch money with her in high school, who had driven her to the emergency room when she broke her wrist, who knew exactly how she liked her coffee, extra shot, oat milk, no sugar. She walked back to the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. Blake looked up, his familiar smile spreading across his face, the same smile that had been her anchor through every storm, every breakup, every career change. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, closing his phone and giving her his full attention. "Everything okay?" Emma settled into her chair, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic mug. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too intimate. She watched Blake's face, memorizing the way his eyebrows furrowed slightly when he was concerned, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident she had witnessed. "I need to ask you something," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I need you to let me finish before you say anything." Blake's expression shifted, his body language becoming more alert. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the table between them. "All right, I'm listening." The words sat heavy in her throat. She had practiced this moment 100 times, but now, faced with his earnest green eyes and the weight of their friendship, every rehearsed phrase seemed inadequate. "We've been friends for 12 years, she continued, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "You've seen me through my worst moments, my best moments. You know me better than anyone in this world." She paused, gathering her courage. "You know, I've never been with anyone, really been with anyone." Blake's expression didn't change, but she caught the slight tightening around his eyes, the look he got when he was processing something significant. "I've been thinking about it," Emma said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "about why I've waited. And I realized it's not because I was waiting for the right person to love me. It's because I was waiting for someone I could trust completely, someone who would be gentle with me, who would care about my experience more than their own." The coffee shop noise faded into background static. Blake's breathing seemed to slow, his full attention focused on her words. "Blake," she said, finally meeting his eyes directly, "I want you to be my first. Not because I'm in love with you, but because I trust you. Because I know you would never hurt me. Because when I imagine finally taking that step, the only person I can picture is you." The silence stretched between them, thick with possibility and terror. Blake's face had gone through several emotions, surprise, confusion, something that might have been panic, before settling into an expression she couldn't read. A businessman at the next table laughed loudly at something on his phone, the sound jarring in the bubble of tension surrounding their conversation. Emma realized she had been holding her breath, waiting for Blake's response, for some sign of what this moment would cost them. But Blake Anderson, the man who had built an empire on quick decisions and calculated risks, seemed to have forgotten how to speak. And as Emma watched the man she trusted most in the world struggle with her request, she wondered if she had just destroyed the most important relationship in her life. Blake's silence stretched longer than she had ever experienced with him, and that terrified her more than any rejection. 3 days had passed since the coffee shop conversation, and Emma found herself staring at her phone for the 100th time, waiting for a text that never came. The small apartment she had called home for 2 years suddenly felt suffocating. its cream-colored walls closing in on her as she paced between the kitchen and living room. Her fingers hovered over Blake's contact name, thumb trembling above the call button. They had never gone more than 24 hours without some form of communication. A meme, a work complaint, a random observation about life. Now, the silence felt like a physical weight pressing against her chest. The doorbell rang, jolting her from her spiral of anxiety. Emma rushed to the peephole, her heart hammering with hope that somehow Blake had decided to show up unannounced, ready to talk through the mess she had created. Instead, she found Lennox Chen, her neighbor from across the hall, holding a steaming casserole dish and wearing her characteristic worried expression. "Honey, I heard you pacing all night," Lennox said as Emma opened the door. The older woman pushed past her without invitation, setting the dish on the small dining table. "When my late husband used to pace like that, it meant one of two things. Either he was about to make a brilliant business decision, or he was about to do something incredibly stupid." Emma managed a weak smile. Lennox had been like a surrogate mother since Emma moved in, always appearing with food and unsolicited advice whenever life got complicated. Today, Emma was grateful for the intrusion. "It's complicated," Emma said, settling into one of the mismatched chairs that made up her dining set. "Complicated usually means it involves a man," Lennox observed, removing the foil from what appeared to be her famous chicken and rice casserole. "And given that you've been checking your phone every 30 seconds, I'm guessing it's that handsome friend of yours who picks you up sometimes." Emma's cheeks flushed. She had never explicitly discussed Blake with Lennox, but the older woman had sharp eyes and an uncanny ability to read people. "I asked him for something," Emma said carefully. "Something that might have been too much." Lennox studied her face with the intensity of someone who had raised 3 children and buried 1 husband. "Was it something you needed? Or something you wanted?" The question hit Emma harder than she expected. She had been so focused on Blake's reaction, or lack thereof, that she hadn't stopped to examine her own motivations. Had she asked because she truly wanted Blake to be her first, or because she was tired of carrying the weight of inexperience? "I thought it was something I needed," Emma admitted. "But now I'm not sure about anything." Her phone buzzed on the table, and Emma's heart leaped. But it was just a work email, another client wanting to discuss rebranding strategies. She set the phone face down, disappointed. "You know what I learned in 43 years of marriage?" Lennox said, spooning the casserole onto 2 plates without asking if Emma was hungry. "The worst conversations are the ones you don't have. My Harold used to clam up whenever something scared him. Drove me crazy for years until I realized that his silence wasn't rejection. It was processing." Emma accepted the plate, inhaling the familiar comfort of Lennox's cooking. "What if I ruined everything?" "Then you ruined it being honest," Lennox replied matter-of-factly. "Better to ruin something with truth than to keep it perfect with lies." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, Blake's name appeared on the screen. Emma's fork clattered against her plate as she grabbed the device. "Can we talk? I've been thinking about what you said." Emma's hands shook as she typed back. "When?" The response came immediately. "Tonight. My place, 7 p.m. Lennox watched Emma's face transform from anxiety to something that might have been relief, or might have been terror. "Well?" the older woman asked. Emma set down her phone, her appetite returning for the first time in days. "He wants to talk. And how do you feel about that?" Emma considered the question as she took a bite of the casserole. How did she feel? Nervous, certainly. Hopeful, maybe. But underneath all of that was something else. A quiet determination that surprised her. "I feel like I'm about to find out if I was right to trust him," she said finally. Lennox nodded approvingly. "That's the best kind of conversation to have." As Emma finished her meal, she couldn't help but wonder what Blake had been thinking about for 3 days, and more importantly, what he was planning to say when she walked through his door in just a few hours. Whatever happened tonight would determine whether she had destroyed their friendship or transformed it into something neither of them had expected. The elevator ride to Blake's penthouse felt like the longest 43 seconds of her life. Emma studied her reflection in the polished steel doors, adjusting her navy sweater for the 3rd time. She had changed clothes twice before leaving her apartment. First the red dress that seemed too suggestive, then the oversized hoodie that felt too casual. The sweater and dark jeans struck the right balance. Approachable but not desperate, familiar but not careless. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 32nd floor, and Emma's stomach dropped. Blake's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the downtown high-rise, a testament to his digital empire's success. But tonight, the luxury felt intimidating rather than impressive. She knocked twice, their old signal from high school, and heard footsteps approaching. When Blake opened the door, Emma was struck by how different he looked. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. His green eyes carried shadows she had never seen before, and his smile seemed forced. "Hey," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "Hey yourself," Emma replied, trying to match his casual tone even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Blake's penthouse was exactly as she remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that somehow managed to feel warm rather than sterile. The kitchen island held 2 cups of tea, steam rising from both. He had remembered her preference for chamomile in stressful situations. "I made tea," Blake said unnecessarily, gesturing toward the cups. "Thought we might need something to do with our hands." Emma accepted the offering, grateful for the warmth against her palms. They stood in the kitchen, the massive space suddenly feeling too small, too intimate. The city lights twinkled below them, but neither seemed interested in the view. "So," Blake began, then stopped. Emma had never seen him struggle for words like this. Blake Anderson, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals, seemed lost in his own kitchen. "So," Emma echoed, taking a sip of tea to buy herself time. Blake moved to the living room, settling into the corner of his charcoal sofa. Emma followed, choosing the opposite end, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain the illusion of safety. "I've been thinking," Blake said, his voice careful and measured, "about what you asked. About us." He paused, studying her face. "Emma, you know I care about you. You know I would do anything for you." Emma's heart sank. She recognized the tone, gentle but firm, the same voice he used when turning down business proposals that didn't align with his vision. "But," she prompted, setting down her teacup with deliberate steadiness. "But I need to understand why it has to be me," Blake continued. "You're beautiful, Emma. You're smart, funny, kind. You could have anyone. Why are you asking this of me?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Emma had prepared for rejection, for awkwardness, even for anger. She hadn't prepared for Blake to question her motivations. "Because," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, "I don't want anyone. I want someone who sees me, really sees me. Not just the surface, not just the possibility of conquest, but all of it. The good, the messy, the complicated." Blake's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across his features. "You think I see you?" he asked quietly. "I know you do," Emma replied without hesitation. "You're the only person who has ever seen me exactly as I am and chosen to stay." The silence stretched between them, heavy with 12 years of friendship and 3 days of uncertainty. Blake's jaw tightened, and Emma realized he was fighting some internal battle she couldn't see. "Emma," he said finally, "if we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. You understand that, right? We can't pretend it didn't happen. We can't just return to the way things were." Emma felt something shift inside her chest, a door opening that she hadn't realized was closed. "I know," she said. "Maybe I don't want to go back." Blake's green eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since she had arrived, his smile seemed genuine. "Maybe," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Neither do I." The admission hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. Emma realized she was holding her breath, waiting for Blake to either reach for her or pull away. Instead, he did something she didn't expect. He laughed, soft and uncertain, like a man who had just discovered he was standing at the edge of a cliff he hadn't known existed. His laugh broke something open between them, and there was no turning back. "Are you laughing at me?" Emma asked, though her tone held no accusation. Blake's unexpected reaction had dissolved the tension in the room, replacing it with something warmer, more honest. "No," Blake said, running his hand through his already disheveled hair. "I'm laughing at myself, at this whole situation. 3 days ago, you were my best friend asking me something impossible. Now you're sitting here telling me you don't want to go back, and I'm realizing I've been lying to myself for longer than I care to admit." Emma set down her teacup, her full attention focused on Blake's face. "What do you mean?" Blake stood up, pacing to the window where the city lights painted patterns across his features. "I mean, I've spent 3 days trying to convince myself that what you asked was purely practical, that you just needed someone safe, someone trustworthy. But the truth is, Emma, The idea of being with you, of being your first, it doesn't feel like a favor. It feels like a privilege. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither had been willing to acknowledge. Emma felt her breath catch, her heart stuttering against her ribs. "Blake," she said softly, standing to move closer to him. "Look at me." He turned, and she saw something in his green eyes that made her stomach flip. Not just desire, though that was there too. Something deeper, more complicated. "I need you to know something," Emma continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "When I asked you this, I wasn't settling. I wasn't choosing the safe option. I was choosing the person I trust most in this world. The person who makes me feel most like myself." Blake's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing the careful control he usually maintained. "Emma, if we do this, when we do this," she corrected, stepping closer until she was within arm's reach. "Because I can see it in your eyes, Blake. You want this too. Not just the physical part, but all of it. The connection, the trust, the intimacy." Blake's hand lifted as if to touch her face, then hesitated. "I don't want to hurt you." "You won't," Emma said with quiet certainty. "That's why it has to be you." The space between them crackled with tension, 12 years of friendship suddenly viewed through a completely different lens. Emma could see the moment Blake made his decision. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing deepened, and his hand finally completed its journey to her cheek. "Are you sure?" he asked, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Emma replied, leaning into his touch. Blake's other hand found her waist, pulling her closer until there was barely any space between them. Emma could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "We'll take it slow," Blake murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "We'll stop whenever you want to stop. This is about you, Emma, about what you want, what you need." Emma's hands found the front of his shirt, fingers splaying against the solid warmth of his chest. "What I want is you," she whispered. "All of you. Not just tonight, but—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain about voicing the thought that had been growing in her mind since their conversation began. "But what?" Blake prompted gently. Emma looked up into his eyes, seeing her own reflection there, seeing the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and fragile and completely necessary. "But I think I want more than just one night," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Blake's smile was slow and wondering, like someone who had just discovered something they hadn't known they were looking for. "Good," he said, his lips brushing against her forehead, "because I don't think one night is going to be nearly enough." And as Blake's mouth finally found hers, Emma realized that what had started as a request for experience had become something else entirely, something that felt suspiciously like the beginning of forever. The kiss was soft at first, tentative as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But as Emma's arms wound around Blake's neck, as his hands tightened on her waist, the kiss deepened into something that felt both completely new and perfectly inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Emma knew that whatever happened next would change everything between them. And for the first time in 3 days, that thought didn't terrify her. It thrilled her. She woke up in Blake's arms, and for the first time in her life, everything felt perfectly right. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blake's bedroom, casting golden patterns across the rumpled sheets. Emma's eyes fluttered open slowly, her body warm and content in a way she had never experienced before. Blake's arm was wrapped around her waist, his breathing steady and peaceful against her neck. The night had been everything she had hoped for, and nothing like she had expected. Gentle and passionate, awkward and perfect, filled with laughter and whispered confessions that had nothing to do with physical intimacy and everything to do with emotional connection. Emma shifted slightly, careful not to wake Blake, and studied his sleeping face. His features were relaxed, the worry lines around his eyes smoothed away. She had seen him sleep before, during college study sessions, on camping trips, during movie marathons that ran too late. But this felt different. This felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with their state of undress. Blake's eyes opened gradually, focusing on her face with a slow smile that made Emma's heart skip. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," Emma replied, suddenly shy despite everything they had shared the night before. Blake's hand found her face, thumb tracing her cheek with the same gentle reverence he had shown her throughout the night. "How are you feeling?" Emma considered the question seriously. How was she feeling? Her body ached in new places, but it was a good ache, a reminder of the connection they had forged. More importantly, her heart felt full in a way that surprised her. Different, she said honestly, but good different. Amazing different. Blake's smile widened and he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. I'm glad. They lay in comfortable silence for several minutes, the morning light growing stronger around them. Emma traced patterns on Blake's chest with her fingertip, marveling at the ease between them. She had worried that things would be awkward after, that they would struggle to find their footing in this new dynamic. Instead, everything felt natural, like they had been moving toward this moment for years without realizing it. Blake, Emma said, her voice tentative. Last night? Was it what you expected? Blake was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair. No, he said finally. It was better. It was... He paused, searching for words. Emma, I've been with other women, but last night felt like the first time for me too. Like everything before was just practice for being with you. Emma's chest tightened with emotion. She lifted her head to look at him directly. Really? Really, Blake confirmed, his green eyes serious. I didn't know it could feel like that. So connected. So... right. Before Emma could respond, Blake's phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. He glanced at it, frowning. Work? Emma asked. My assistant, Blake said, reaching for the device. There's a board meeting this morning that I completely forgot about. He looked at Emma apologetically. I have to go in for a few hours. Emma felt a flicker of disappointment, but she pushed it aside. Real life couldn't stop just because they had crossed a monumental threshold. Of course, she said, sitting up and reaching for Blake's shirt, which had been discarded on the floor the night before. I should get going anyway. I have a client presentation this afternoon. Blake caught her wrist gently as she started to pull on the shirt. Emma, wait. She looked at him, noting the uncertainty in his expression. What happens now? He asked. Between us, I mean. Emma felt her breath catch. It was the question she had been afraid to ask. The elephant in the room that could either bring them closer or tear them apart. I don't know, she said honestly. What do you want to happen? Blake sat up, his hands framing her face. I want to find out, he said simply. I want to see where this goes. But Emma, I need you to know, this isn't just about last night for me. This isn't just physical. What is it then? Emma whispered. Blake's thumb stroked across her cheekbones as he searched her eyes. I think, he said slowly, it might be everything. The admission hung between them, heavy with possibility and terror. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming realization that what had started as a simple request had become something neither of them had seen coming. Blake, she began, but he silenced her with a gentle kiss. Think about it, he said against her lips. Take your time, but Emma, I'm already falling. As Emma left Blake's penthouse an hour later, wearing his Georgetown University sweatshirt and carrying her clothes from the night before, she realized that she wasn't falling. She had already fallen. The question now was whether she was brave enough to admit it. 2 weeks had passed since that morning, and Emma was beginning to think she had imagined the entire thing. Emma stared at her laptop screen in the crowded Starbucks on 5th Street, the cursor blinking mockingly at her as she tried to focus on the Morrison Industries rebranding proposal. The familiar hum of conversation and coffee machines should have been comforting, but today it felt like white noise against the deafening silence from Blake. Her phone sat face up beside her laptop, the screen dark and unforgiving. No missed calls, no text messages, no late-night rambling voicemails that had been their tradition for years. Nothing. Earth to Emma, came a voice from beside her table. Emma looked up to find Weston Hayes, her college friend and fellow designer, sliding into the empty chair across from her. His dark skin was flushed from the October cold, and his signature smile was tinged with concern. Wes, Emma said, forcing brightness into her voice. What are you doing here? Same coffee shop I always come to, Weston replied, unwrapping his scarf. The question is, what are you doing here looking like someone stole your favorite sweater and then kicked your dog? Emma managed a weak laugh. I don't have a dog. Exactly my point. You look that miserable over a hypothetical pet tragedy. Weston signaled to the barista for his usual order, then turned his full attention back to Emma. Talk to me. What's going on? Emma closed her laptop, recognizing that she wasn't going to get any work done anyway. Weston had known her since freshman year design theory class, and he had an uncanny ability to see through her carefully constructed facades. It's complicated, Emma said. The same phrase she had been using with everyone who asked about her recent mood. Complicated usually means boy trouble, Weston observed, accepting his coffee with a nod of thanks. And since you haven't dated anyone seriously in 2 years, I'm guessing this involves the mysterious Blake who picks you up from events but never comes inside. Emma's stomach lurched. She had never explicitly discussed Blake with Weston, but her friend was observant and had clearly connected dots she hadn't realized she was leaving. We crossed a line, Emma admitted quietly, and now everything is weird. Weston leaned forward, his expression shifting from casual concern to serious interest. What kind of line? Emma felt heat creep up her neck. The kind you can't uncross. Ah, Weston said, understanding dawning in his eyes. And now he's pulling the classic rich guy disappearing act? He's not like that, Emma said quickly, then paused. Was he? At least I didn't think he was like that. Emma, Weston said gently, I've seen this before. Guy gets what he wants from his female friend, then suddenly remembers he has a company to run and social circles that don't include complicated emotions. The words hit Emma like a physical blow, mainly because they echoed fears she had been trying to suppress for 2 weeks. Had Blake gotten what he wanted and moved on? Had she been naive to think their connection meant something deeper? He said he was falling, Emma whispered, more to herself than to Weston. What did you say back? Emma's throat tightened. Nothing. I left for my client meeting and then... She gestured helplessly at her silent phone. Weston was quiet for a moment, studying her face with the intensity of someone solving a particularly complex design problem. Emma, he said finally, have you considered that maybe he's waiting for you to reach out? What do you mean? I mean you left him hanging after he basically confessed his feelings. Maybe he thinks you're the one who disappeared. Emma felt the world tilt slightly. In her anxiety about Blake's silence, she had forgotten that communication was a two-way street. She had been so focused on waiting for him to make the next move that she hadn't considered making one herself. But what if he doesn't want to hear from me? Emma asked, voicing her deepest fear. Then you'll know, Weston said simply. But Emma, what if he does? Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. Her heart leaped, hoping to see Blake's name, but instead it was a Google alert for Anderson Digital Entertainment. Blake's company. The headline made her blood run cold. Tech mogul Blake Anderson spotted with socialite Vivian Cross at charity gala. Emma's hands trembled as she clicked the link, revealing photos of Blake in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his arm around a stunning brunette in a shimmering gold dress. They were both smiling at the camera, looking every inch the power couple. The caption read, "Sources close to Anderson confirm this is the second public appearance for the pair this month." Emma's laptop screen blurred as tears she hadn't expected filled her eyes. Weston, who had been watching her face, gently took the phone from her hands. "Oh, honey," he said softly after reading the article. Emma felt something break inside her chest, a sharp pain that had nothing to do with physical injury and everything to do with the realization that maybe she had been right to trust Blake with her body, but wrong to trust him with her heart. "I guess," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that answers that question." She decided to disappear from his world completely, but the world had other plans. Emma had spent 3 days avoiding every place she might run into Blake, switching coffee shops, taking different routes to work, even declining her favorite yoga class because it was too close to his office building. She threw herself into her design projects with manic intensity, staying up until 2 a.m. perfecting color palettes and typography choices that didn't need perfecting. The Morrison Industries rebranding proposal sat completed on her desk, 3 days ahead of schedule, and executed with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that came from channeling heartbreak into productivity. But grief, Emma discovered, had a way of finding you even when you tried to outrun it. She was leaving the small market on Elm Street, arms full of groceries that would probably go bad in her refrigerator, when she nearly collided with someone coming around the corner. "Emma," Blake's voice stopped her cold. She looked up to find him standing 3 feet away, and the sight of him hit her like a physical blow. He looked tired, she noticed, despite herself. His usually pristine appearance was slightly rumpled, his green eyes carrying shadows that matched her own. "Blake," she managed, adjusting her grip on the grocery bags. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying. Blake's hands were shoved deep in his coat pockets, and Emma could see him struggling with how to begin. "Can we talk?" he asked finally. "I don't think that's a good idea," Emma replied, taking a step backward. "Emma, please." There are things you don't understand. Actually, I understand perfectly. Emma interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. I saw the photos, Blake. You and Vivian Cross. Very cozy, very public. Message received, loud and clear. Blake's expression shifted from pleading to confused. What photos? Emma stared at him, disbelief warring with anger in her chest. Seriously? You're going to pretend you don't know what I'm talking about? I genuinely have no idea what photos you mean, Blake said, taking a step closer. Emma, I haven't been with anyone since... He stopped, glancing around the busy sidewalk. Can we please not do this in the street? Despite every instinct telling her to walk away, Emma found herself nodding. Blake's confusion seemed genuine, and she needed to understand what game he was playing. There's a diner around the corner, she said quietly. 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a red vinyl booth at Mickey's Diner, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between them. Blake had his phone out, scrolling through what appeared to be Google results. Show me, he said, sliding the device across the table. Emma pulled up the article that had shattered her 3 days ago. Blake's face grew darker as he read, his jaw tightening with each line. Son of a bitch, he muttered under his breath. Blake, this is from the Children's Hospital fundraiser, Blake said, looking up from the phone. Vivian is my cousin's wife, my cousin David, who was supposed to be my date, but came down with food poisoning at the last minute. Vivian went with me so the ticket wouldn't go to waste. Emma felt the world shift beneath her. Your cousin's wife. They've been married for 4 years, Blake confirmed, pulling out his own phone. Look, here's David's Instagram from that night. He showed her a photo of a man who shared Blake's green eyes, lying in bed with a thermometer in his mouth and a caption that read, "Food poisoning is the worst. Thanks to V for being Blake's charity date so my ticket didn't go to waste." Emma stared at the screen, her mind reeling. But the article said it was your second public appearance. The first was David and Vivian's anniversary party last month, Blake said, where I was literally the best man giving a speech about their marriage. He leaned back in the booth, running his hands through his hair. Emma, I can't believe you thought I would... He stopped, his expression shifting to something like hurt. Actually, I can't believe you didn't just ask me. The accusation hung between them, and Emma felt shame wash over her. He was right. She had jumped to the worst possible conclusion without giving him a chance to explain. I tried calling you, she said weakly. When? Blake asked, pulling out his phone. Because I don't have any missed calls from you. Emma's cheeks burned. I didn't actually call. I thought about calling. Blake stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his features. Emma, I haven't contacted you because I thought you needed space. You left that morning saying you had to think about things, and I wanted to give you time to process everything without pressure from me. You were giving me space? Emma asked, her voice small. I was trying to be respectful, Blake said. I was trying not to be the guy who pushes for answers before you're ready to give them. He paused, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Emma, I haven't been able to think about anything else for 2 weeks. I've been going crazy wondering if you regretted what happened between us. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I thought you regretted it. Never, Blake said immediately, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. Emma, that night meant everything to me. You mean everything to me. The simple touch of his hand on hers sent warmth shooting through Emma's entire body. She had missed this, missed him, more than she had allowed herself to acknowledge. Blake, she began, but he held up his other hand. Before you say anything, he said, I need you to know something. I've been trying to give you space, but I can't do it anymore. I'm in love with you, Emma. Not just attracted to you, not just fond of you. In love with you. Completely, hopelessly, head over heels in love with you. Emma's breath caught in her throat as Blake's words washed over her, erasing 2 weeks of doubt and pain in an instant. And if you don't feel the same way, Blake continued, that's okay, but I needed you to know before. I love you too, Emma interrupted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I love you so much it terrifies me. Blake's smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, and when he lifted her hand to his lips, Emma realized that some truths were worth the wait. Love, Emma discovered, was both easier and harder than she had imagined. 3 months had passed since their tearful reunion at Mickey's Diner, and Emma was learning the rhythm of being Blake's girlfriend, a word that still felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. They had fallen into patterns that felt both new and ancient. Morning coffee dates before work, late-night phone calls when Blake traveled for business, lazy Sunday afternoons spent in his penthouse or her small apartment. Emma was reorganizing her design portfolio at her kitchen table when her phone rang. Blake's name appeared on the screen, along with a photo from their weekend trip to the mountains, both of them windblown and laughing, his arm around her shoulders. "Hey," she answered, unable to keep the smile out of her voice. "Hey yourself," Blake replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice too. "How's the Morrison presentation prep going?" "Good. Scary, but good." Emma had landed her biggest client yet, a tech startup looking to rebrand before their IPO. The project could change everything for her fledgling consultancy. "I keep second-guessing the color palette. The one you showed me yesterday? Emma, it was brilliant. Trust yourself." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. Blake had been her biggest supporter, celebrating every small victory and offering encouragement during moments of doubt. But more than that, he had been genuinely interested in her work, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights from his own business experience. "Speaking of trusting myself," Emma said, setting down her stylus, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" Emma took a deep breath. The conversation she was about to start had been building in her mind for weeks, but she had been afraid to voice it. "I think I want to move in together," she said quickly, before she could lose her nerve. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Emma began to panic. "Blake, are you still there?" "I'm here," Blake said, his voice careful. "Emma, are you sure? We've only been officially together for 3 months." Emma felt her stomach drop. "You don't want to live together?" "That's not what I said," Blake replied quickly. "Emma, I would love nothing more than to wake up next to you every morning, but I want to make sure you're not rushing into something because you think it's what I want." Emma smiled despite her nervousness. Even in this, Blake was thinking of her first. "I'm not rushing," she said. "Blake, I've never lived with a boyfriend before. I've never wanted to. But with you, the idea of going to sleep in your arms every night and waking up to your terrible bedhead every morning sounds like the best possible version of my life." Blake's laugh was warm and relieved. "My bedhead is not that bad. It's absolutely terrible," Emma said, grinning. "And I love it." "In that case," Blake said, "yes. 1,000 times yes. But Emma, we're doing this right. We'll take our time, find a place that's ours. Not mine, not yours, but ours." Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The fact that Blake wanted to start fresh, to build something together rather than her simply moving into his established space, meant more than she could express. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too, more than I thought it was possible to love someone." After they hung up, Emma found herself staring out her kitchen window at the city beyond. 6 months ago, she had been a woman afraid of intimacy, hiding behind walls of self-protection. Now she was planning a future with someone who saw every part of her and chose to stay. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lennox. "Haven't heard your pacing in weeks. Should I assume this means good things?" Emma typed back, "The best things." But as she returned to her portfolio, a nagging worry crept into her mind. Blake's world was bigger than hers. Corporate events, business trips, social circles filled with successful, sophisticated people. What happened when the honeymoon phase ended and reality set in? What happened when he realized that a small-time design consultant might not fit into his larger life? Emma shook her head, trying to dispel the doubts. Blake had never made her feel like she didn't belong. If anything, he seemed more relaxed, more himself when they were together. She was borrowing trouble from a future that might never come. Her phone rang again, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. This time it was an unknown number. "Emma Sullivan?" The voice was crisp, professional, female. "Speaking. This is Delilah Sterling from Metropolitan Living magazine. I'm calling because we're doing a feature on rising power couples in the city and Blake Anderson's name came up. We understand he's been seeing someone seriously?" Emma's blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, what?" "We'd love to set up a photo shoot and interview. The piece would focus on how successful people balance love and career. Very positive, very tasteful." Emma's mind raced. "I think you have the wrong number. Is this not Emma Sullivan, the design consultant dating Blake Anderson?" Emma hung up without answering, her hands shaking. She stared at the phone as if it had personally betrayed her. How did a magazine know about their relationship? More importantly, how did they know her name and professional details? Before she could process what this meant, her phone rang again. This time it was Blake. "Emma," he said without preamble, "we need to talk." The conversation that would test everything they had built was about to begin. Emma paced her small living room, Phone pressed to her ear as Blake's voice filled the space with an urgency she had never heard before. Emma, listen to me carefully, Blake said. Don't answer any calls from numbers you don't recognize. Don't open your door unless you're expecting someone. And whatever you do, don't talk to any reporters. Reporters? Emma's voice cracked. Blake, what's happening? A woman from Metropolitan Living just called me about some power couple feature. Shit, Blake muttered. Emma, I'm coming over. Don't leave your apartment. You're scaring me, Emma said, sinking onto her couch. What aren't you telling me? Blake was quiet for a moment and Emma could hear traffic in the background, the sound of him moving quickly through the city. There's a rumor, he said finally, about us, about how we met, about our first time together. Emma felt the world tilt. What kind of rumor? The kind that makes it sound like I paid you, Blake said, his voice tight with anger. Like you were some kind of escort. Emma's phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the coffee table. She stared at it for several seconds before picking it back up. Emma? Emma, are you there? I'm here, she whispered. Blake, how is this possible? We never told anyone about... I don't know, Blake said. But I'm going to find out. Emma, you need to know that my publicist is already working on this. We're going to kill this story before it goes anywhere. Your publicist, Emma repeated slowly. The words felt foreign in her mouth, a reminder that Blake lived in a world she barely understood. Emma, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Before Emma could answer, someone knocked on her door. Her blood ran cold. Blake, someone's here. Don't answer it, Blake said sharply. But Emma was already walking toward the door, drawn by a terrible curiosity. She looked through the peephole and saw a young man with a camera hanging around his neck, accompanied by a woman in a sleek black coat. Ms. Sullivan, the woman called through the door. We're from City Scene magazine. We'd just like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Blake Anderson. Emma backed away from the door as if it were on fire. They're here, she whispered into the phone. Blake? They're at my door. I'm 5 minutes away, Blake said. Emma, go to your bedroom and lock the door. Don't come out until I get there. Emma followed his instructions, her hands shaking as she turned the lock. She sat on her bed, listening to the continued knocking and the muffled voices outside. Her phone buzzed with notifications, friend requests on social media from people she didn't know, messages from old college acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years. When Blake's voice finally came through the door 20 minutes later, Emma nearly cried with relief. Emma, it's me, open up. She unlocked her bedroom door to find Blake standing in her living room, his hair disheveled and his expression grim. Behind him stood a severe-looking woman in her 50s wearing a perfectly tailored suit. This is Claudia Torres, my publicist, Blake said without preamble. Claudia, this is Emma. Claudia stepped forward, her handshake firm and businesslike. Ms. Sullivan, I need you to know that we're treating this situation with the utmost seriousness. Someone leaked information about your private relationship and we're going to find out who. Emma looked between Blake and Claudia, feeling like she was drowning. I don't understand. Who would even know enough to... She stopped, a terrible thought occurring to her. Blake, did you tell anyone? About that first night? Blake's face darkened. No, never. Emma, I would never share something that private. But someone knows, Emma said, her voice rising. Someone knows intimate details about our relationship, about why I asked you. She couldn't finish the sentence with a stranger in the room. Claudia consulted her tablet. Miss Sullivan, I need to ask you some questions. Have you confided in anyone about the nature of your relationship with Blake? Friends, family, colleagues? Emma thought frantically. I told my neighbor Lennox that I'd asked Blake for something, but I didn't give her details. And my friend Weston knew we had crossed a line, but... She trailed off, remembering something. But what? Blake asked. Weston knew about my inexperience, Emma said slowly. We've been friends since college. He knew I had never, and when I was upset about you being with someone else, I might have said too much about why it hurt. Blake and Claudia exchanged a look. We'll need to speak with this Weston, Claudia said. Ms. Sullivan, I know this is difficult, but we need to control the narrative before this gets out of hand. Gets out of hand? Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's already out of hand. There are reporters at my door asking if I'm Blake's paid companion. Blake moved toward her, reaching for her hands, but Emma stepped back. Emma, he said softly, we're going to fix this. How? Emma asked, tears finally spilling over. Blake, even if we prove the rumors are false, people will always wonder. They'll always look at me and think that maybe, just maybe, I was some kind of— She couldn't say the word. "Emma, listen to me," Blake said, his voice fierce. "I don't care what people think. I care about you. I care about us. But I care what people think," Emma said, her voice breaking. "Blake, this could destroy my business, my reputation, everything I've worked for." Claudia cleared her throat delicately. "There is one way to definitively end these rumors." Both Blake and Emma turned to look at her. "A public engagement," Claudia said matter-of-factly. "Nothing kills escort rumors quite like a very public, very romantic proposal. The media loves a love story." Emma felt the room spin around her. "A fake engagement?" "Not fake," Claudia corrected. "Accelerated. If you two are serious about each other, this would simply be moving up your timeline." Emma looked at Blake, seeing her own shock reflected in his green eyes. 6 hours ago they had been discussing moving in together. Now they were talking about engagement as a PR strategy. "I need some air," Emma said, moving toward her bedroom. "Emma, wait," Blake started. "Please," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just need a minute to think." As she closed the bedroom door behind her, Emma could hear Blake and Claudia talking in low, urgent voices. She pressed her back against the door and slid down to the floor. Everything was falling apart, and she didn't know if love would be enough to put it back together. Sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing to fight for it, even when the world tells you to walk away. Emma sat on her bedroom floor for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, listening to the muffled conversation outside. When she finally emerged, she found Blake alone in her living room, staring out the window with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Claudia was nowhere to be seen. "She left," Blake said without turning around. "I told her we needed time to think." Emma studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders. "And what are you thinking?" Blake turned to face her, and Emma was startled by the raw emotion in his green eyes. "I'm thinking that I'm furious. Not at you, never at you, but at this whole situation, at whoever leaked our private business, at the fact that something beautiful between us is being twisted into something ugly." "Blake, let me finish," Blake said, moving closer to her. "I'm also thinking that Claudia is right. A public engagement would end the rumors immediately. But Emma, I won't use our love as a publicity stunt. If we get engaged, it needs to be because we both want to spend our lives together, not because some gossip columnist forced our hand." Emma felt tears well up in her eyes. Even in crisis, Blake was thinking of her feelings first. "What if we can't fix this?" she asked. "What if the rumors stick? Blake, I can't be the woman who destroyed your reputation." Blake's expression shifted to something fierce, almost angry. "Emma Sullivan, don't you dare." "Don't I dare what?" "Don't you dare try to sacrifice yourself for my reputation. Don't you dare suggest that you're not worth fighting for." Blake stepped closer, his hands framing her face. "Emma, I would rather lose every client, every business deal, every dollar I've ever made than lose you. Do you understand that?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Blake, you don't mean that." "I've never meant anything more in my life," Blake said, his thumbs stroking across her cheekbones. "Emma, 6 months ago I thought I had everything I wanted. Success, money, freedom. But I was just going through the motions of living. Then you asked me for something impossible, and suddenly I understood what I had been missing." "What?" Emma whispered. "Purpose," Blake said simply. "You gave me purpose, Emma. Loving you, protecting you, building a life with you. That's what matters. Everything else is just noise." Emma felt something break open in her chest, a wall she hadn't even realized she had been building since the crisis began. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Blake, I'm terrified that your world is too big for me, that I'll never be enough for—" Blake silenced her with a kiss, soft and desperate and full of everything he couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. "Emma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you're not too small for my world. My world was too small until you were in it." Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. Both of them froze, staring at the device as if it might explode. "It's Weston," Emma said, recognizing the number. Blake nodded. "Answer it. We need to know." Emma picked up the phone with trembling fingers. "Wes?" "Emma, oh my God, I am so sorry." Weston's voice was thick with tears. "I never meant for this to happen. I was at a bar last night and I was talking to this woman about relationships and she seemed so understanding, and I might have had too much to drink and—" "Weston?" Emma interrupted, her voice surprisingly calm. "Did you tell someone about Blake and me?" "I thought she was just a random person. Weston sobbed. I didn't know she was a journalist. Emma, I'm so sorry. I was trying to explain how beautiful your story was, how you had found real love with your best friend, and I might have mentioned the beginning, about how you asked him to. Emma hung up the phone and looked at Blake. It was Wes. He told a journalist at a bar. Blake's jaw tightened, but his voice was gentle. How do you feel? Emma considered the question. How did she feel? Angry, yes. Betrayed, definitely. But underneath all of that was something else. Relief. Relief that the mystery was solved, that they knew what they were dealing with. I feel like I'm done running, Emma said finally. Blake's eyebrows rose. What do you mean? Emma moved to her laptop, opening it with sudden determination. I mean, we're going to tell our story, our way, before anyone else can twist it. Emma, what are you doing? I'm writing a blog post, Emma said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. About love, about trust, about the courage it takes to be vulnerable with someone, about how the most beautiful relationships sometimes start in the most unexpected ways. Blake read over her shoulder as she typed, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something that might have been awe. You're going to tell them everything? He asked. I'm going to tell them the truth, Emma corrected. That I asked my best friend for something precious, and he gave me more than I ever dreamed possible. That what started as a request became the greatest love story of my life. Blake was quiet for a long moment, watching her write. Emma, are you sure? Once this is public, there's no taking it back. Emma stopped typing and turned to look at him. Blake, I spent 28 years afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to take risks, afraid to ask for what I wanted. Then I asked you for one night and you gave me forever. I'm not going to let fear steal that from us. Blake's smile was slow and wondering, like sunrise breaking over the horizon. In that case, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket, I have something for you. Emma's heart stopped as Blake pulled out a small velvet box. Blake, she breathed. This isn't because of the crisis, Blake said quickly, dropping to one knee beside her chair. I bought this 2 weeks ago before any of this happened. I was waiting for the right moment, but Emma, I'm beginning to think the right moment is any moment when I get to choose you. Emma's hands flew to her mouth as Blake opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant solitaire that caught the afternoon light streaming through her window. Emma Sullivan, Blake said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Will you marry me? Not for the publicity, not to stop the rumors, but because I can't imagine a single day of my life without you in it. Emma looked down at the man who had been her friend, her first lover, her greatest love, now kneeling in her tiny apartment with his heart in his hands. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, Blake Anderson, I will marry you. I will choose you every day for the rest of my life. As Blake slipped the ring onto her finger, Emma realized that sometimes the most beautiful endings were really just the beginning of something even more extraordinary. And when her blog post went viral the next day, telling their love story in their own words, the world didn't see a scandal. They saw what Emma and Blake had always known, that real love, honest love, was worth fighting for. 6 months later, some love stories end with, I do, but the best ones are just beginning. Emma stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite at Riverside Gardens, adjusting the delicate straps of her wedding dress for the 100th time. The gown was simple, flowing ivory silk that caught the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows, but it made her feel like the most beautiful version of herself. Stop fidgeting, Lennox said from behind her, putting the finishing touches on Emma's hair. You look absolutely radiant, and if you keep adjusting that dress, you're going to wrinkle it. Emma smiled at her neighbor-turned-maid of honor in the mirror. Lennox had been her rock through the chaos of the past 6 months, from the media storm to the wedding planning, to the successful launch of Emma's expanded design consultancy. The blog post about their love story had done more than clear the air. It had brought Emma dozens of new clients who were drawn to her honesty and authenticity. I'm not nervous about marrying Blake, Emma said, smoothing her hands over the silk one final time. I'm nervous about all those people out there. Through the window, she could see the garden ceremony space filling with guests. What had started as a plan for an intimate gathering of 50 had grown to nearly 200 people. Blake's business associates, Emma's new clients, friends from college, and family members who had flown in from across the country. Honey, Lennox said, securing the last bobby pin, those people aren't here to judge you. They're here because they love you and Blake, and they want to celebrate your happiness. A soft knock interrupted them, and Weston's voice came through the door. Emma, can I come in? Emma had forgiven Weston weeks ago, understanding that his mistake had come from a place of love rather than malice. Still, their friendship was rebuilding slowly, carefully. "Come in, Wes." Weston entered wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, his eyes immediately filling with tears when he saw Emma. "Emma," he breathed. God, you look perfect." "Thank you," Emma said, accepting his careful hug. "And Wes, thank you for coming. I know things have been weird between us, but I'm glad you're here." "I wouldn't miss this for the world," Weston said, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, I know I messed up, but seeing how everything turned out, maybe some mistakes are actually blessings in disguise." Emma squeezed his hand. "Maybe they are." Another knock, this one from David Anderson, Blake's cousin and best man. "Emma, Blake sent me to check on you," David called through the door. "He wants to make sure you haven't changed your mind and run off with the wedding photographer." Emma laughed, the sound bright and clear. "Tell him the photographer is very sweet, but he doesn't make coffee the way I like it." "I'll pass that along," David replied, amusement in his voice. "Emma, we're ready when you are." Emma took one last look in the mirror, seeing not the scared woman who had asked her best friend for an impossible favor, but someone confident, radiant, and deeply loved. Her reflection showed a woman who had learned that the greatest risks often led to the greatest rewards. "I'm ready," she said. The ceremony was everything Emma had dreamed of and nothing like she had expected. The garden was decorated with white roses and fairy lights, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and intimate. But Emma barely noticed the decorations, the photographer, or the sea of faces watching them. All she saw was Blake. He stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his green eyes locked on hers from the moment she appeared at the end of the aisle. His smile was radiant, transforming his face in a way that made Emma's heart skip. This was the same man who had held her hand through panic attacks, who had celebrated every small victory in her business, who had loved her through scandal and growth and change. As Emma's father walked her down the aisle, she found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. 6 months ago she had been afraid to ask for what she wanted. Now she was claiming it, publicly and joyfully, in front of everyone who mattered to them. When they reached the altar, Blake's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Hi," he whispered, "just for her." "Hi yourself," Emma whispered back, using their old greeting like a prayer. The ceremony was a blur of vows and rings and promises. Emma spoke about courage and trust, about how love had taught her that the scariest conversations often led to the most beautiful outcomes. Blake talked about friendship and forever, about how the best relationships were built on a foundation of genuine friendship and mutual respect. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Blake's kiss was soft and reverent, full of promise and possibility. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Anderson." As they walked back down the aisle together, rice and rose petals falling around them like snow, Emma caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd. Claudia Torres, Blake's publicist, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Emma's college professors, beaming with pride. Strangers who had become friends through business connections and shared experiences. But most importantly, she saw the faces of people who had believed in their love story from the beginning. Lennox, Weston, David and Vivian, Blake's parents, her own family, all smiling and cheering and celebrating the fact that sometimes, when you're brave enough to ask for what you want, the universe gives you more than you ever dared to hope for. During the reception, as Emma and Blake swayed together during their first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, Blake whispered in her ear, "Any regrets, Mrs. Anderson?" Emma pulled back to look at him, this man who had been her friend, her first love, and now her husband. His green eyes were warm and questioning, and she knew he was asking about more than just the wedding. "Only one," she said, her lips curving into a teasing smile. Blake's eyebrows rose. "What's that?" "I regret waiting so long to ask you for that favor," Emma said. "Think of all the time we could have had." Blake's laugh was rich and joyful, drawing smiles from the guests surrounding the dance floor. "Emma Anderson," he said, spinning her around until her dress flowed like water around them. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." As the song ended and their guests applauded, Emma realized that Blake was right. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of a lifetime of mornings in each other's arms, of building a business and a family and a future together, of continuing to choose each other every single day. She had asked her best friend for one night, and he had given her forever. And as they were surrounded by the people they loved most, Emma knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories started with the simple courage to ask for what your heart truly wanted. Have you ever been brave enough to ask someone for exactly what you needed, even when it scared you? What did you learn about the power of vulnerability in love? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.